The Westlake Academy for Boys was a sprawling monument of brick and ivy, an old-world institution with a reputation as pristine as its manicured lawns. My parents, obsessed with its academic pedigree, had sent me here as a transfer student. I was a quiet kid, a natural observer, and from the moment I arrived, the school's rigid structure felt less like a guide and more like a cage. The routine was absolute. Bell at 7 a.m., breakfast at 7:30, classes until 1 p.m., then a silent hour of study hall. Every day the same. The other boys moved through the day like clockwork, their faces blank with a kind of resigned acceptance. It was unsettling. I tried to talk to my roommate, a boy named Sam, about it, but he just shrugged. "That's just the way it is here," he said, his voice flat. "It's the routine." But the routine had cracks. On my second day, I got lost trying to find the library. The hallways were long and identical, and I swore I had taken the same turn 3 times. When I finally reached the library, the door was on the left side of the hallway, but I was certain, absolutely certain, it had been on the right when I passed by a minute earlier. I shook my head, telling myself it was just a new school, and I was just disoriented. The next unsettling thing happened during study hall. The bell rang precisely at 1:55 p.m., the same time every day. But as I was gathering my books, I noticed the large antique clock on the wall. Its hands showed 1:40 p.m. My watch confirmed it. I pointed it out to the boy next to me, but he just stared at me blankly. "The bell rang," he said, and walked out, his expression as blank as the day I arrived. Over the next few weeks, the small discrepancies became a pattern, a quiet, insidious terror that no one else seemed to notice. The ornate carvings on the door frames would subtly change their shape. The number of windows in the dining hall would be different from one meal to the next. The school wasn't just old and confusing, it was rearranging itself. It was as if the building itself were breathing, its bones shifting and settling into new forms. I started documenting it. I drew maps of the hallways and noted the location of doors, the number of windows, the pattern of the floorboards. Every night, I would compare my maps to the school's layout, and every night the map would be different. The shifts were small, almost imperceptible. A corridor that had been straight would now have a slight curve. A staircase that had led up would now descend. The fear was a cold knot in my stomach. The students here weren't blank because of the routine, they were blank because they were trapped by it, accepting the changes as normal, a terrifying kind of amnesia that was slowly erasing their perception of reality. The school was a predator, and its routine was its hunting ground, feeding on their collective obedience and denial. One night, the fear became absolute. I was walking back to my dorm, my flashlight a single beam in the suffocating darkness of the long hallway. I looked at my map and confirmed my location, a locked supply closet. But as I watched, the handle of the door began to turn, slowly, and the door, a solid oak door that should have been sealed shut, began to slowly open, revealing a gaping black void beyond. It wasn't just rearranging itself, it was hungry. The air that drifted from the open supply closet was icy, carrying a scent of dust and something else. Something vaguely metallic, like old blood. The darkness within seemed to writhe, not with shadow, but with a deeper absence of light, a void that felt like it could swallow me whole. My flashlight beam hit nothing, the darkness absorbing the light as if it weren't there at all. Then, I heard it. A faint scratching sound, like fingernails dragging across wood, coming from within the void. It started slowly, erratically, and then picked up pace, becoming rhythmic, insistent. It sounded like something was trying to claw its way out. Terror lent me a sudden burst of adrenaline. I backed away from the door, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The scratching stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the sound had been. It felt like something was listening, waiting. I ran. I ran through the silent, shifting hallways, my footsteps echoing in the oppressive quiet. The school felt different tonight. The subtle changes more pronounced, more aggressive. Corridors stretched out into impossible lengths, turning corners that shouldn't have been there. Staircases twisted and spiraled downwards into what felt like the very depths of the earth. The familiar layout I had tried so desperately to map was gone, replaced by a labyrinth of cold stone and oppressive silence. I found myself in a classroom I didn't recognize. The desks were arranged in a circular pattern, facing inwards. In the center of the room, carved into the wooden floorboards, was a single word: routine. The letters were deep and jagged, as if they had been scratched there in a fit of violent desperation. The door behind me slammed shut with a deafening bang. I whirled around, but the door was still there, solid and unmoving. But it wasn't the door I had entered through. The handle was on the opposite side, and the wood grain was different. The room had changed again, trapping me. The scratching started again, this time closer, coming from the walls. It was all around me now, a chorus of frantic, desperate clawing. The word carved into the floor seemed to pulse, the shadows around it deepening and swirling. Then, the bell rang. It wasn't the usual crisp, precise chime of the school bell. This was a long, drawn-out toll, a mournful sound that echoed through the shifting corridors. As the sound faded, a new sound began. Footsteps. Heavy, dragging footsteps coming from the hallway outside the classroom. They were slow and deliberate, the kind of footsteps that belonged to something heavy, something that had all the time in the world. They stopped outside the door. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. The doorknob began to turn. Slowly. The doorknob turned slowly, inexorably. A deep, rasping breath from the other side was the only sound. It was the sound of a lung filled with gravel, a sound that held all the terror of the world. The door swung open, and I was staring into the black, gaping void I had seen in the supply closet. But it wasn't empty. Something was there. A tall, impossibly thin figure stood in the doorway. It was a person, but not a person. Its limbs were too long, too spindly, and its face was a blank, featureless expanse of pale, smooth skin. It was Sam, but it wasn't Sam. A wave of pure, unadulterated terror washed over me. This was what the routine did. It didn't kill them. It erased them. It consumed their fear, their individuality, their faces, until all that was left was a blank slate, an empty vessel to be used by the school. The other students hadn't been resigned. They had been hollowed out. The thing that was once Sam took a single, dragging step into the room. Its head tilted and a dry, whispering sound came from the place where its mouth should have been. The bell has rung. The voice was not Sam's. It was the sound of scraping stone, a chorus of 100 voices speaking as one, a horrifying echo of the scratches I had heard in the walls. The school was a hive mind, and its inhabitants were its drones. I lunged for the window, my mind a frantic haze of adrenaline and fear. I tore at the lock, my fingers fumbling with the rusted metal. The thing that was Sam glided towards me, its movements a silent, unnatural ballet. Its hand reached out, its fingers unnaturally long and thin, reaching for my face. I finally got the window open and I scrambled through, my clothes tearing on the sharp edges. I fell to the ground outside, landing hard on the manicured lawn. I didn't stop to feel the pain. I got up and ran, my legs pumping, my lungs burning. The school stood behind me, a towering monument of brick and ivy, its windows like 1,000 black eyes staring at me. I could hear a faint, distant bell ringing. The routine. It was coming to an end. I didn't stop running until I reached the main gates where a single old bus sat, its engine idling. The door was open. I threw myself into a seat, gasping for breath, my body shaking with exhaustion and terror. The bus driver, a stoic old man with a flat, unchanging expression, just stared forward, his hands on the wheel. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his voice a dry, toneless rasp. I just nodded, unable to speak. I looked back at the school, and through the bus window I saw its reflection. And as I watched, the school's grand, imposing facade began to blur. The bricks shifted, the windows realigned, the ivy twined and untwined. The school was rearranging itself, but it wasn't rearranging itself into a new floor plan. It was rearranging itself into a face. My face. The driver laughed, a short, dry sound that was completely without humor. "No one ever really leaves," he said. I looked at my hands, my trembling fingers. I could still feel the cold glass of the window, the rough fabric of the bus seat. But then, I felt something else. A new sensation. The subtle shifting of a brick here. The quiet lengthening of a corridor there. The oppressive stillness of 1,000 blank faces. The school had found a new home. Not in the building, but in me. It had assimilated my consciousness, my perception, my very being. I looked in the mirror and I saw my face. My features were still my own, but my eyes were blank. And as I watched the bus drive away, I realized that I wasn't leaving the school. I was a part of its routine now, and I was its newest passenger. I never thought staying late for detention could feel like stepping into another world. The halls of Lincoln High were supposed to be silent after 7 p.m., but tonight, they weren't. The fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting long, trembling shadows down the empty corridors. I, Ethan, dragged my backpack behind me, the echo of each step unnaturally loud. The janitor had left hours ago, and the only sound I could hear was the hum of the old heaters, and then, faintly, a dragging shuffle that wasn't mine. I told myself it was my imagination. Schools play tricks at night. But then I saw it. A notebook lying on the floor of classroom 204. It wasn't mine. The pages flipped, as though caught in a wind that didn't exist. And across the page, in handwriting I didn't recognize, words were forming. "We've been waiting." The chill crawling up my spine didn't make sense. I knelt, reaching for the notebook, and the hallway lights went out. Darkness pressed in, thick and heavy. My phone's flashlight trembled in my hand, revealing the classroom in fleeting bursts. Then the whispers started, soft, almost coaxing, yet filled with malice. I could hear my own name repeated over and over, stretching down the hall, bouncing off the lockers, echoing from the ceiling tiles. I ran, but the hall seemed to elongate, turning back on itself. Doors I had passed were now open, revealing rooms that should have been locked. Inside, shadows moved, but not with human gait. They slid, stretched, detached from any body, reaching for me. One classroom door slammed shut behind me, and I found myself staring at the mirror mounted near the old trophy case. At first, I thought it reflected me, but then I saw her. My dead classmate, Lily. Her eyes hollow, her mouth whispering something I couldn't hear. The reflection wasn't bound by the glass. She tilted her head, pointing toward the stairwell. I ran down, heart hammering. My own footsteps were joined by others, hundreds, countless, following my every move. Not on the floor, above, below, everywhere, but unseen. And then I realized the shadows weren't just watching, they were learning, waiting for me to falter. By the time I reached the auditorium, the small footprints were everywhere, dozens of tiny, inhuman tracks leading toward the stage. And there she was again, floating above the dusty floor, her eyes reflecting my fear back at me, magnified. A whisper curled around my ears. "You can't leave. Until you remember." It wasn't just the school haunting me. It was the past itself made flesh and shadow. And I had no idea how much I had buried. The night had grown colder, the air heavier, almost viscous. Every breath I drew felt like I was inhaling the building itself. I forced myself to follow Lily's floating figure toward the library, the faint glow of my phone's flashlight barely piercing the gloom. The library doors were massive, antique, and they groaned as I pushed them open. Inside, the shelves stretched impossibly high, beyond the ceiling, packed with books that shouldn't exist. Titles flickered in the dim light, changing as I passed. The lie I told in 3rd grade, the secret I hid from my parents, the betrayal of my best friend. Every memory I'd tried to forget now stood before me in tangible form. Then the whispers became voices, soft, urgent, accusing. They came from the shadows between the bookshelves, from the corners of the room, circling me. Every step I took seemed to awaken them, pulling the air tighter around my chest. I stumbled over a stack of books and they fell, not with sound but with a darkness that clung to the floor. Shadows rose like smoke, writhing, forming shapes almost human but distorted, as though my memories themselves had taken flesh. "Do you remember what she wanted?" A voice hissed behind me. I spun, but the library was empty, or so I thought. Lily hovered closer, her mirrored eyes reflecting every fear, every regret I had tried to bury. The ceiling cracked above and plaster fell, hovering in midair. Faces formed in the fragments, screaming, crying, pointing at me. The shadows on the walls began to writhe, stretching toward me with slow, deliberate intent. My heartbeat pounded so loudly I could hear it over the whispers. Then I saw the mirrors. Small, cracked, scattered across tables and shelves, each reflecting a different version of me. A younger me, a guilt-ridden me, a terrified me. All trapped, all screaming silently. And they weren't trapped. They were reaching out, silently begging for attention, demanding acknowledgement. I backed into a corner. Lily floated in front of me. "You've always been here. You just never saw," she whispered. Her voice carried all the weight of the building, every shadow, every trapped soul. The books themselves began to move, pages flipping violently, words etching themselves in red across the walls. Remember. Every forgotten moment, every hidden shame, every act of cowardice I had hoped to erase. Alive, sentient, demanding recognition. I tried to run. The aisles twisted impossibly, rearranging themselves, corridors forming where shelves had stood moments before. Every exit I tried led me back to the same place. Lily followed, calm, unmoving, hovering just out of reach. Then the whispers coalesced into a single voice. "Face it. Name it. Own it." I fell to my knees, shaking. I betrayed my friend. I lied. The words spilled out, trembling, chaotic. The shadows recoiled, shrank, twisted. Some disappeared entirely, melting into the floor and walls. Lily watched silently. Her eyes reflected my admission back at me, brighter, sharper, clearer. The air grew still. For a moment I thought I was free. Then the library doors slammed shut behind me, louder than a cannon. The shadows surged back, faster, stronger, more insistent. I realized remembering was only part of it. Surviving this night would demand everything I had ever hidden, and I wasn't sure I had enough courage left. By the time I stumbled out of the library, my legs were shaking, my lungs burning. The hallways had transformed again. Tiles stretched endlessly, doors leading to rooms I had never seen before. The fluorescent lights flickered in uneven rhythms, casting shadows that moved independently of the walls. Lily floated ahead, silently pointing toward the gymnasium. I knew instinctively that whatever waited there would decide everything. My flashlight trembled in my hand, casting jagged beams that barely penetrated the darkness. As I approached the gym, I heard it. Hundreds of footsteps, circling, overlapping, moving with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Only they weren't mine. They were lighter, faster, coming from every direction. I couldn't escape. The gym doors opened on their own. Inside, mirrors lined every wall, reflecting me infinitely, but each reflection was slightly wrong. My eyes were hollow, my expression twisted with fear and regret, my body leaning toward the shadows as if I had already been claimed. Then I saw them, my classmates, or at least what they had become, floating in midair, twisted by anger and grief, their eyes dark voids. Their mouths opened, but no sound came out. And then a hand shot from the ceiling, translucent, cold, brushing my cheek. I felt a shock, like a memory I had tried to forget, now burning into my mind. Lily's voice rang out, clearer than ever. "Which reality do you belong to? Life or shadow?" I froze. Every instinct screamed to flee, but every path led to another mirror, another shadow, another memory I could not deny. The gym became a labyrinth, each reflection a trap, each shadow a sentinel. I realized then the building wasn't alive, it was conscious. It was feeding, learning, waiting for me to falter. The whispers became a torrent, pressing against my mind. Admit it. Accept it. Remember it all. My memories collided with the present. Betrayals, lies, cowardice, secrets, all shimmering in the mirrors, screaming silently. I felt myself splitting, a shadow version of me reaching for my real body. I screamed. My voice, though loud, seemed to be swallowed by the air. "Remember the promise you broke," the shadows hissed. "Face the truth." I fell to the floor, clutching my head. I whispered every secret aloud, every fear, every failure. The shadows recoiled, flickered, and began to vanish, dissolving into the tiles, the walls, the very air itself. For a heartbeat, the gym was silent. I dared to breathe. My flashlight flickered back to life. Lily hovered before me, eyes reflecting the final truth I had just admitted. "You remembered," she said softly. "You're free, for now." The mirrors shattered violently, fragments spinning in midair before vanishing. The gym doors swung open, revealing the cold night outside. I stumbled forward, the crisp air filling my lungs. I had survived, but the cost was immeasurable. Even as I left, I could feel them, the invisible footsteps, trailing me. Every shadow in the darkened street whispered, reminding me that the school had not released me entirely. My memories, my guilt, my fear, they would follow, waiting for the next time I let my guard down. And in that moment I knew, some places are never truly empty, and some fears never truly die. I never thought a single stopped clock could change everything. My name is Leo, a junior at Westwood High in Los Angeles, and it was exactly 11:11 when I noticed it. The clock in the main hall froze. The second hand didn't twitch. At first, I thought it was just a technical glitch. Everyone else was busy heading to their next class, oblivious to the stillness above. But then I realized something stranger. The familiar clang of the bell never came. The usual cacophony of footsteps, laughter, and chatter. It didn't reach me. It was like the school had swallowed its own sound, leaving only the eerie hum of fluorescent lights. I glanced around. The corridor looked normal. Lockers lined the walls, the bulletin board still plastered with notices, but everything felt wrong. Shadows twisted where they shouldn't be, stretching unnaturally along the walls. I rubbed my eyes. Nothing changed. I walked toward my classroom. Every step sounded muted, yet behind me I felt a faint echo of something dragging along the floor. I turned abruptly. No one. Just a shadow flickering across the lockers. When I reached the door, my own voice startled me. "Hello?" I called. Normally I'd expect a response, even a muffled one, but silence, not just absence of sound, an oppressive void that pressed against my ears. I entered. The classroom was empty, desks in neat rows, the chalkboard still half erased from earlier notes. But as I passed the first row, I noticed something impossible. One of the desks had my name carved into it, freshly, as if someone had just etched it. My hand shook. I tried to shake off the unease and sat down. Pulling out my notebook, I scribbled a few notes to calm my racing thoughts. And then I heard it. A whisper. So faint I thought I imagined it. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, behind the board, inside the lockers, even beneath my chair. I glanced around. Nothing. Minutes passed. The silence stretched and thickened. Then I noticed the chalkboard. Words were forming on their own, faintly glowing. 11:11. The bell will not save you. I stumbled back, my chair screeching against the floor. That's when I noticed them. Tiny ripples in the air, distorting the edges of the room like heat haze. a faint shimmering where a student had been sitting moments ago. I blinked. The shape flickered and vanished. I ran to the door, but the hall outside looked different. The lockers were taller, the walls stretched farther than I remembered. Shadows moved, alive. I could see students, or echoes of them, faint, translucent, frozen in moments of panic, laughter, or fear. They weren't fully there, yet they were undeniably present. Panic surged. I tried to reach my phone, but no notifications came through. My messages weren't delivering. Even the Wi-Fi signal was gone. Everything I knew about the school's normality had been swallowed. I heard a footstep. One, then another. Slow, deliberate. I spun around. No one there. But the whispers multiplied, overlapping voices now calling my name, laughing, sobbing. I hid behind a row of desks, shaking. Shadows stretched from the walls toward me, forming hands, arms, almost human, but wrong. Wrong in the angles, in the way they moved. They reached, but never touched. Just hovering, waiting. A sudden realization hit me. The clock. 11:11. The bell didn't ring. And now, everyone in the school was trapped in that same frozen moment, a loop that erased existence sound by sound. My stomach dropped. I had to get out. I bolted to the main hall. The doors weren't there. Just walls where exits should have been. The shadows followed, whispering, their voices blending into a single chilling chorus. Time erases all. Even you. I sank against a locker, gasping for breath, feeling my own heartbeat falter against the oppressive silence. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A hand, pale and flickering, reaching out of a locker toward me. Not solid, just a smear of reality, dragging toward my existence. I screamed. My voice didn't echo. It didn't exist. Then I realized this was no ordinary night. The stopped clock hadn't frozen time for everyone. It had frozen it for me, and everything around me was slipping away slowly, invisibly, until only shadows remained. I had to survive until the bell rang, but the bell had already vanished. I didn't know how long I had been pressed against that locker, heart hammering in the unnatural silence. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but run where? The doors, the windows, every exit I remembered was gone. In their place, shadows, stretching and writhing, like ink spilled across the hall. Then I heard it. Faint footsteps again, slow, deliberate, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once. But this time, they weren't mine. Someone, or something, was walking through the frozen corridors. I peeked around the corner. A figure appeared, barely visible at first, a girl, translucent, floating slightly above the tiles. Her eyes were hollow, yet they burned with intent. She raised a hand, and the lockers around her shivered as if alive, trembling with memories I couldn't reach. I stumbled backward, almost tripping over a desk that had not been there a moment ago. The walls around me rippled, and I realized the school itself was breathing. Hallways expanded and contracted like lungs, swallowing light, stretching space, twisting geometry until the familiar building became a labyrinth of impossibility. I tried calling out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" No response. Not even my own voice. I was unmade in sound. The whispers returned, louder, overlapping, 100 tones forming a chaotic chorus. You belong to the time that stopped. Panic surged. I turned and ran. The hallway bent around me, stretching endlessly. Doors I tried were not doors. They dissolved into walls as I approached. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision. One shape moved too fast to be human. I could see it stretch and snap back, eyes forming and dissolving. I reached the gym. Its double doors were open. I ran inside, desperate for any sign of normality. But the gym was a void. The basketball court lines shimmered and shifted like liquid. The hoops hung impossibly high, bending toward me. And on the floor, dozens of footprints appeared, small, childlike, moving in circles, never crossing one another, all leading toward the far bleachers. A chill ran down my spine. The whispers became words I understood. Follow, or be erased. I had no choice. I followed the footprints. They led me to the bleachers. A single spotlight illuminated a figure, the same girl, now sitting, perfectly still, staring directly at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Yet I understood. Memories. She was pulling them from me. Each fear, each regret, each unspoken word. I could feel my past unraveling. I tried to run, but my legs moved through molasses. Shadows clawed at my skin, pulling at me, trying to merge my body into the dark floor. And then the clock, somewhere far above, ticked once, just once. A second hand moved. The walls groaned. I realized with terror, the bell hadn't disappeared. It had chosen me. 11:11 wasn't just a time, it was a portal, a threshold between existence and erasure. Every second that passed without sound, the school consumed more students, more memories, more reality. Desperate, I tore open a janitor's closet, hoping for supplies. Inside, a mirror reflected. Not me. My reflection was older, thinner, eyes hollow, skin gray. Behind me, shadow hands reached up from the floor, pulling at the air itself. I turned, but no one was there. Just the reflection, grinning. I realized something horrifying. The girl wasn't leading me. She was testing me. Every memory I remembered, every fear I acknowledged, she absorbed and cataloged. The more I resisted, the faster the shadows multiplied, erasing what I was. Then a new sound broke the silence. Faint laughter, a dozen voices overlapping, coming from the lockers. I looked, and there, in the reflections of the metal, were my classmates. Or at least, versions of them. Twisted, fading, trapped in the still time. Their mouths opened, but no sound escaped. One by one, their eyes met mine, pleading silently, "Help us." I couldn't. I was alone. The gym expanded further, a labyrinth of shadows and echoes. The footprints glowed faintly again, this time forming a path toward the library. Against my better judgment, I followed. Inside the library, bookshelves shifted. Books fell open on their own. I caught glimpses of memories I didn't recognize, past students decades ago, their regrets trapped in ink and paper. And then I understood. The school consumed the unremembered, the incomplete. It was not just a place of learning. It was a collector of forgotten truths. The girl floated ahead, raising her hand again. Shadows surged forward, forming a wall of darkness that blocked my path. The whispers now roared inside my head. Remember or vanish. And in that moment I realized, the vanishing bell wasn't about ringing or time. It was about acknowledgement. The school demanded recognition, confession, and understanding. Otherwise, it erased you entirely. My knees buckled. Sweat drenched me. I had no idea how long I wandered following that girl through corridors that bent reality itself. But somewhere, deep in the shadows, I felt my own existence thinning. I had survived part one because I had just begun to notice the oddities. But here, in the heart of the vanishing bell, I understood. Survival required more than sight. It required confrontation. And the confrontation had only just begun. The library stretched endlessly, walls bending like liquid, books floating midair. I stumbled forward, my flashlight flickering. Each step felt heavier, as though reality itself weighed me down. The whispers had grown into a chorus, hundreds of voices overlapping, pleading, laughing, accusing. Then I saw her, the girl, floating above the center aisle, her eyes mirrors reflecting my deepest fears. Around her, shadows swirled like a storm, shapes of students long vanished, frozen in torment. I realized with a jolt, these were all the lost, those erased by the vanishing bell before me. A book floated toward me, opening midair. On the page, my own secrets stared back at me. Petty lies I'd told, moments I'd ignored, friends I'd betrayed. Each memory glimmered faintly as if calling my name. I reached out, but the shadows recoiled, hissing. The girl's gaze pierced me, silent but insistent. Face it, or be gone. Panic surged. I screamed, but no sound emerged. My voice had vanished entirely. And then I noticed my reflection in the library glass. Hollow-eyed, colorless. My fingers passed through my own reflection, melting into nothingness. I was becoming part of the Vanishing Bells collection. I had to act. Closing my eyes, I forced my mind to remember everything, the mistakes, the regrets, the pain I had buried. Each confession echoed in the library, causing the floating books to shudder. Shadows screamed, clawing at each other, trying to stop me, but I pressed on. A hand touched my shoulder, cold, solid. I whipped around, expecting the girl, but it was me, my younger self, trembling, pale, staring with wide, terrified eyes. I understood instantly. The school had manifested my past, forcing me to confront the person I used to be. I knelt and whispered aloud every hidden truth, every guilt, every regret. The library shook violently. The whispers reached a deafening crescendo. I felt myself being pulled in every direction at once. But finally, the shadows began to recede. The girl floated closer, her eyes softening, no longer mirrors of fear but of acknowledgement. "You remembered," she whispered. "You exist, for now." The school convulsed. Hallways straightened, walls solidified, books settled on shelves. The vanishing bell above ticked once more, then froze. Time resumed. The corridors looked normal again, eerily silent as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I stumbled toward the exit. Doors appeared where none had existed. Light spilled from windows that were previously dark. I felt every step as a triumph, yet also a reminder. My existence remained fragile. A glance behind revealed the shadows had withdrawn, but traces lingered in the corners, flickering like dying embers. I pushed open the main doors. Outside, the night was calm, moonlight reflecting off the empty schoolyard. I was free, or so it seemed. My phone buzzed. A notification, an unread text from myself. "The vanishing bell waits for no one. Remember or vanish." A chill ran down my spine. I realized the truth. Surviving was temporary. Every secret I ignored, every unacknowledged fear, would give the bell another chance. My existence, fragile as a whisper, now depended on vigilance. I had escaped the night, but the shadow of the vanishing bell followed me. Inside my mind, inside every heartbeat. I walked away from the school, but the footsteps remained, invisible, persistent, reminding me that fear never truly leaves. It waits, it observes, and one day, it will call again.